On this year's RVing Journey with Purpose, we're going to stop at 3 camps and 1 conference center. Well, at the first camp we stopped at, we heard a really amazing story about how the camp got started, and we wanted to share that with you. Now, it's a little bit longer than our normal videos, but I'm sure if you hang with it, you will be inspired about how God can take a vision and turn it into a fantastic mission. Hi, I'm Dwight.
And I'm Connie.
And we're Beck's Back Road.
And we're here in Glorieta, New Mexico at Glorieta Adventure Camp.
The camp is just 20 miles outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and what a beautiful setting it is.
It sure is. We've been here for a month, and we volunteered and helped get a lodge ready for campers this summer.
And what a busy summer camping season they have.
They sure do. They're expecting over 38,000 campers to come through this summer.
While we were here at the camp, we got to hear from the camp CEO, Anthony Scott, about what it was like to get the camp started and about God's provision and providence in making it all happen. He learned a lesson that when God gives you a mission, He also provides the provision to carry out that mission.
But instead of hearing it from us, let us hear it from Anthony Scott, the CEO of Glorieta.
Well, it's always hard to figure out where to start, but I'm going to start when I was 17. And you're like, oh, I better get some more coffee. But when I was 17, I attended a camp in West Texas. And it's one of those camps where you get on the bus with your church group and you go somewhere. And I had to ask my youth pastor decades later, where did we go? Because we just went to camp, and it was a place called Chaparral, West Texas, something camp, right? And doesn't matter about the camp. It's the place that the Lord got a hold of my heart. I was a 17-year-old kid, had gone to church my whole life every time the doors were open, but had never really begun my relationship with Jesus. And so 17, Friday night service, everybody's running down front to sign their little commitment cards and start a radio ministry in Africa or whatever was popular back then. And I sat in my seat because I was like, I have seen this for years. And all those people who run down front are the same on Monday mornings. And so I would love to serve you, Lord. Tell me when, and I'll be there. I was kind of an arrogant kid, and so we got to fast forward. And so now I'm living in Dallas, Texas. I was a commercial construction management guy, going to church with my wife. We had a kid and a baby on the way, and the Lord said, "Hey, it's time." She was studying at Southwest Medical Center to get her PhD. Smart gal, and so I went home one day and said, Laura, I think the Lord's calling us to full-time ministry, vocational ministry. And she said, where are we going? I said, I don't know. And she goes, well, I'm in. She's a missionary kid. Her parents, you've met them, Wycliffe Bible translators. And so, yeah, they were with Wycliffe for 25 years. So it took us 2 years to kind of figure out where God would have us to go. And in that time, we looked at children's homes and different things. It wasn't this clear vision of go be a camp director. And through that, I was sharing this story with my pastor at the time. And he'd said, what do you really, really want to do? And I was like, well, I want to work with youth. I was volunteering at the youth group. I love being outside. I love being creative. And, and so through that, he said, well, maybe you should go start a camp. And it's like, well, I'm a young guy who pays the bills, and that's about it, and so I don't know how I'd ever do that. So I get to church the next week, and he goes, hey, you still interested in starting a camp? Because I have a friend that's a real estate agent down in the Texas Hill Country, and there's this old corporate retreat center down there, LTV Corporation, Ling Temco bought. They owned it for a few years, and it's been sitting there empty for a long time. And they became Boeing and Wilson Sports. I mean, it was a big company. I said, well, that's great. I still don't have any money. And then the next week, he's like, hey, I was talking to that same realtor, and some things broke loose. And he said, the guy really wants to get rid of it. Why don't we drive down there together? So we went, and he thought the whole place would need bulldoze. It's a beautiful place. on the headwaters of the Nueces River. It goes all the way to Corpus Christi, but this is up in the hill country, and beautiful, beautiful property. And the guy wanted, $3 million for it. And I was like, Clay, I don't have $3 million and I don't have to $30, but, and he goes, well, let's just see what happens. And so, the gentleman who was the landlord of our church, a little strip center church thing, had been up to Kennecott, heard of that in Missouri, and his son had had a life transforming moment with the Lord up there. But he's a Texas guy, and he's like, "There's got to be a camp in Texas so we could be part of." Didn't know at the time that there's almost 700 camps in Texas, and so Clay and I walk in his office, and he says, "What do you guys want?" He thought we wanted to buy the strip center to make the church bigger or something. I said, "Well, we actually just want to talk to you about a piece of property down in the Texas Hill Country." And he goes, "Well, show me on this map where it is." And he rolls out a map, and we point at it right here. And he goes, "I literally just bought 3,000 acres across the river from there." And he goes, "Why don't you guys go buy yourself a camp?" We said, "Well, did you miss the part where we don't have any money?" He said, "Talk to my secretary on the way out, and she'll give you the down payment." So sight unseen, the Lord provided just that fast to say, "Go buy this property, go run a Christian camp." So that was in 1998. So we'll fast forward. So it's 2007. We bought the property. Wells Fargo gave me a loan. I was 26 years old, signed a piece of paper for $3.2 million to buy this piece of property, and with this down payment. And every year I would go in and talk to a guy named Greg. And Greg was a guy that I knew, went to church there in Kerrville, Texas with us. And he loved what we did, but in his banker, he had to do his thing. And in 2007, I went in to sign this piece of paper that said I could do camp for the next year. That's what I thought it said. Should have read it. It was a balloon payment, And so 2007, he goes, with all the banking things that happened back in 2007, he said, "Hey, we need the capital." And I said, "Well, I don't have $3 million. He goes, "Well, it's not 3, it's 4.5 now." And it's like, "Oh, well, I still don't have it." And so at this point, we have 5,000 campers coming through. We have our mission statement to inspire Christ-like change through outdoor adventure, authentic relationship, and biblical truth. And we've seen hundreds and hundreds of kids deepen and begin their relationship with Jesus. And we have other things that are happening, outreaches through mountain biking and all kinds of things. And we didn't feel that the Lord was done yet. I said, well, it's like, Greg, this was in September. And I said, "I've already begun to sign up kids for next summer. And so can I have a little time?" And he goes, "I can make the paperwork go until next August." And so, and he said, "But I need to know either way." So I went back and sat in a circle not unlike this with all 11 staff that we had at the time, and said, "Hey guys, I don't know if I'm sailing a sinking ship here, but this is what's going on. And if you need to leave, you can. But I know that we're going to serve over 5,000 campers this next year, and I know that we get to present the gospel to them. I don't know what's after that." And so one gentleman felt like he needed to leave, and everybody else stayed. And we began to pray that the Lord would provide. We really thought that God was going to provide by 5 million of our friends giving $1 each. It was the early days of social giving, but none of us had 5 million friends, or hundreds of friends. And so, in that time of waiting, we began just talking to anybody we knew about what was going on, and the Lord helped me understand a little bit about the organization that I was running at the time, and that we paid our own operational expenses, and that became significant, and that we were serving campers, and we had a strong mission statement, and beautiful piece of property. And so I was in Fort Worth, Texas, looking for money. I talked to lots of people, and I was 6 hours north of Camp Eagle in Fort Worth, and I called a guy named Bo Glenn, and said, "Bo, it's like, what are you doing?" He goes, "Well, I'm in Fort Worth looking for money." And he's from Little Rock, so he's 6 hours south. And it's like, "Well, where are you?" And he goes, "I'm on I-20. He's like, "Me too." And he was in front of me on the road there. And so we pull over to Starbucks and talk and weep a little about the challenges of ministry and money and things like that. And in the process of that conversation, he said, "There's a gentleman that I've heard of, this named David Weekley, and he is a philanthropist that gives to Christian camps a lot, and I think he's given to a lot of them, and you should call him." I said, "Do you have his number?" He said, "No, I don't have his number." And so I went home, and I wrote that down, and I went home, and I didn't forget about it, but I was like, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know how to get a hold of him. And I actually sent notes to the development office that he used and things like that, and didn't really hear anything. And so in that time, it was getting close to the time where I needed to give Greg this answer. And so I had called all the big churches that had come out to our camp and said, hey, you guys love what we do. It's a beautiful property. I'd love for it to stay in ministry. It's yours if you want it. And that was kind of God's kind of one of his early steps of like, let go of it. It's not yours, it's mine. And so I went to these churches, I set up appointments to go to them. And I guess first I called a 1-800 number, David Weekly Homes. I just thought, I'm just going to see what I can do. And I call 1-800 number, and Mr. Weekly answers the phone. This is David. I was like, hey, this is Anthony. I was like, I run this this camp in the Texas Hill Country. We serve 5,000 kids. We pay our own operational expenses. But we have a debt we can't handle, and we're going to have to be closed down if we can't figure out what to do, and don't know if you're interested or know anybody who's interested. And he told us years later that being able to say that we paid our own operational expenses is big, that we're not looking for a continual dole out, that we were able to take care of our business and also do ministry. And he said, well, tell me 6 people that you know that I might know, and answer these questions, and then and email me. So I did, and then by 5 o'clock that night, he'd already emailed me back with a whole nother list of questions about organizational structure and all kinds of things that I honestly didn't really know much about. I was just a camp guy doing my thing. And I emailed him back, and I didn't hear anything. So it was time to go to San Antonio and talk to, Max Lucado's church and CBC and some of the big churches there. And we met with several of them, and all of them said, no, thanks. We're not looking for, so here's the keys, but it comes with $4.5 million debt. And, they kind of stood back. But the last guy at Community Bible Church is like, you're right. God's not done using that place yet. And let's just pray. And so we prayed. And there'd been lots of prayers, and lots of our summer staff had done things like car washes and T-shirt sales, and they would send us the proceeds of their T-shirt sales, $326. And we're like, the interest was $30,000 a month, but it kept us going to know they cared enough to wash cars on the weekend for us. So, on my way back from San Antonio, and the phone rings, and it's Mr. Weekly's secretary, and she says, hey, do you have time to talk to Mr. Weekly? And I said, sure, pull over, and we talk to my secretary, look at my wife who was with me, and pull over, and he goes, hey, I've talked to a couple of my friends, and we give together for accountability. It's 3 of us, and we would like to capitalize your project. I said, all right. He said, but we'd like to meet you in person. Can you come to Houston? So we went to Houston. I hung up the phone, and Laura said, what did he say? I said, well, he's going to capitalize our project. She said, what's that mean? I said, I don't know. But we're going to Houston. So we drove down to Houston and met with these three gentlemen, and told them what we do in our hearts and the challenges we had. And they said, well, let us pray about it. So we left Houston. We're driving home, and the phone rings again. He goes, hey, we talked about it, and we'd like to give you $1.5 million each. And so the next day, they sent checks, sight unseen, for the second time. So pretty amazing. And so they wrote checks to Camp Eagle, they didn't start up a new organization. They didn't say hire my nephew or anything like that. They didn't say change the name. Their name's still not on anything to this day. And they wrote checks to just completely pay the debt. And so it's a big deal. That was 2008. And interesting, it was right before the crash where none of those guys could have been able to do it. They had the money to write $1 million checks. And then, but then the cool thing is they called about a week and a half later. David calls and says, hey, we talked about your board, and it sounds like you need some help. Could the 3 of us join your board? We've all served on lots of boards, but we've never served together. Could we serve together on your board? And I was like, well, I'm going to have to pray about that. And I was like, yes. And so Laura and I were having dinner with him again a decade later or so. And he said, we just realized we gave some kid $4.5 million sight unseen. And we weren't sure if you were going to know how to take care of that real well, And so, and I got to walk into Greg's office, by the way, with a check for $4.5 million and say, "Hey, Greg," and "Where did you get that?" And I got to share the story of God's provision, of how He, sight unseen, took care of a need. So pretty amazing. So that's where we're getting into Glorieta now. So they began asking things like, "Hey, we love what you do. How do we help you do more?" And we'd say, "Well," they finally came to camp after a couple months after giving. We hadn't even got out of the van, and Terry Looper, who calls himself a pipe salesman, he happens to own the pipe that goes from North Dakota to Houston, big pipe, but he's an old pipe salesman. He says, "Looks like you need another $1 million, son." And I was like, "What would I do with that?" Because I felt like king of the world. I didn't have debt. This place is a little rough around the edges because it was this beautiful corporate retreat center, but hadn't been taken care of since the 70s. And we didn't care because we had the river and we had, and so they gave us money to revive that place. And we built 10 buildings in 10 months, and we grew from 5,000 campers to 13,000 campers in 2 years. And we just began doing marketing and things that we couldn't afford to do before. And we were able to see lots and lots of people. We started an individual camp and a wilderness camp, and we had our youth group camps that were happening, and all kinds of things happening. And very exciting times. Every year or every board meeting, the staff would come back and they'd say, "What happened this time?" So, "Well, they gave us, this much money to start a camp up here, and let's get busy." And we were all real young and had tons of energy, and so we would just go hard. And so then it's 2012, getting closer, David says, "Hey, what's next? What are we going to do this year?" And it's like, "Well, we need to slow down because we've grown a lot. We have almost 50 staff, multiple campuses, because it was a 1,300-acre property, so a big property, lots of things happening, but we need to get our systems and processes. We need to train up our people." And he goes, "Well, let's do it again somewhere else." I said, "Oh, okay." And so we began looking at camps in the Rocky Mountains primarily to go, what could we do again? In my mind, we would buy another property that would hold 200 people and grow it over time. And so we'd grown Camp Eagle from 200 beds to 850 beds, and seeing God work in people's lives. That was the most important thing, as we continued to see lives change. And so there were 130 camps for sale. And we found this out through the Christian Camping Foundation. A guy named Bob Kubelich ran that. And so he was trying to help us find a camp. And a lot of those were denominational properties where just things had shifted. And those camps had been, primarily, they hadn't been taken care of. And so if you don't take care of it as you go along, they get run down, and then you can't afford to get back over the hill. And that's one of the things that we had done at Camp Eagle, is started a maintenance reserve. And so we put in a nickel on every dollar, and over time, we were able to save. And so there, at this point, there's well over $1 million in the maintenance reserve at Camp Eagle. And so if a roof gets blown off in a windstorm, we can fix the roof, and you guys appreciate that as people who fix things all the time. And if a vehicle is on its last legs and dangerous for the college staff to drive, we can buy another used vehicle, a newer used vehicle, and steward that money. So that's where we were organizationally. Things were healthy. And we began looking at places. We looked at Red Cloud up here in Colorado, and we looked at Hermit Basin and some different places, and Pine Cove, and some others are looking at places too. And so I was at Mr. Weekly's house in Crested Butte, and we had looked at a property up there, and my phone rings, excuse me, and it's a guy named Byron Hill who worked for Lifeway Christian Resources. Lifeway Christian Resources owned this property at the time, and he says, "Hey, I represent Lifeway, and it's not public, but we're going to try to be disposing of Glorieta, and are you interested?" And I said, "No, sir," and I hung up the phone. Because I think you heard my story before. I'd been here in 2001 with my wife, and said I would never work at a place like that. That place is too big. It's a big conference center. And Mr. Weekly said, "You're literally driving by it on the way home." So I drove around with Laura, and she drove us home. And I began, and David said, "Just dream about what the Lord would have you do with a property like that." So as you guys know from being here, that the property is quite large. There's 205 buildings, over 3,000 beds. and they used it for training. And then training has changed over the years to use the internet and things. And so you don't have thousands of people flocking here for church music week, and then the next week it might be the curriculum for the Sunday school week, and then missions week, and they had all these different weeks. And then Lifeway was able to support the property because then they would sell the curriculum and they would sell the Bibles. And so 40,000 Southern Baptist churches, and they're each buying X number of Bibles, and they could pay for the property and things like that. So that's how it was sustained before. But with Amazon and book sales and all those things diving, that wasn't the way they could take care of this place anymore. And so they tried to make it a youth camp. And my buddy that still a good friend and worked out here 3 years, who was executive director at the time, was given the opportunity to make it a youth camp, but they gave him $25,000 for the attempt. And I was like, I don't know what you're going to do with that. Hire half a person, or but they had good hearts. But it was some guys from Nashville at the time that lived out there, and so I was standing down here by the lake with the Lifeway guys. We decided that we'd try to buy it. So we all flew out here and looked at it, and I was here with Mr. Weekly, walking around and sharing my vision that it would be a place where all these things happen simultaneously. We would continue to do youth camps while we're doing family camp, while we have local outreach, something that hadn't happened for the day camp kids, while we were doing wilderness things, and then use everything else, every other bed that was out here for retreats, because people come to destination locations in the 10 weeks of summer, and then we do 85% of our ministry right in 10 weeks. And so that's why there's over 1,000 kids showing up today, and so, and he's like, well, he's like, that's a good idea. So I was talking to the president of Lifeway, and CFO actually, and he says, that's a good idea, son, but what are you going to do that we couldn't do with all of our resources? And I said, well, sir, and I looked at David, and he nodded like, okay, tell him your dumb ideas or whatever. I said, this place isn't a place that attracts kids right now. I'm going to tie a zip line to the top of that steeple and have it crash right down here into the water. And of course, I couldn't do that with physics, but we're going to draw these kids in. And that's where we're going to use our mission statement to inspire Christ-like change. We're going to use outdoor adventure to get them here. And that's not the end. That's the first step. And then we're going to build relationships. And from there, we're going to share biblical truth. And he kind of looks around, and then he starts laughing, and his entourage starts laughing. And he goes, that's what this place needs. It needs a new vision. So we began negotiating, and they wanted lots and lots of money for the property. And Mr. Weekly said, it has lots of liabilities. He's like, how about you pay us to take it? And they kind of laughed. He goes, no, how about you pay us? And so we ended up the negotiations on $1. And so we bought 205 buildings and 2,400 acres for $1. And a lot of people say that was a great deal, but it's like a tornado. It comes with a lot of power, but a lot of liability. And so we began investing into the property, and we put miles and miles of underground electric infrastructure in, and clay pipes from the 50s have, like with all the ground shifting that happens in the mountains, they crumble all the time. And so we put in miles of 10-inch PVC under there. And then on top of that, we can finally put a road. And so there's different roads. People say, why haven't you fixed that? Because I haven't fixed the clay, the cast iron, and the electricity underneath the road yet. So I don't want to fix that piece of road yet. And so we've been able to raise $45 million to invest back into the property. A lot of it's on roofs and infrastructure. A decent amount of it went into things like recreation, zip lines, and the fun things you're seeing at the waterfront. We built that island, and because we want the kids to be attracted to come. And like I said, that's just a tool. That's not the end all for us. And then we had some other challenges along the way. We had a lawsuit in year one. We had a lawsuit that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And so we had to spend a little time and money going that, because they, were sure we had illegally purchased it and hadn't followed all the rules of the convention, the Baptist convention. And so that was something that the Lord gave us victory over. And we continued to do ministry through that. Most of my staff, they knew it was happening, but it didn't affect their day-to-day. Then in 2017, we had the county try to shut us down. We had one gentleman that tried to, he had a manifesto to shut us down. And he sent letters to 40,000 churches that said we were poisoning kids and that we were doing all these things illegally. I mean, just really was trying to shut us down. And had some legitimate points of things that he's like, yeah, there's all these propane systems out there that haven't been inspected. And I mean, there's 150 something tanks out here, and the state red tagged every one of them in May. And so it was quite the challenge. We put in new yard lines. We replumbed all of the whole dining hall in 30 days. And our zip line was shut down for several years because even though it was engineered out of a group out of Canada, and they did like Calgary Stadium and the San Diego Zoo, and so a pretty reputable group, but they didn't have a New Mexico license. I hadn't checked all of the state laws because I just thought it was just like Texas, and you actually don't say that here, and so we did have engineer drawings and things, but we had to get it all reverse engineered and then re-permitted, and came with lots of fines and things because New Mexico has different rules than we knew about. And so that was 2017. And we continue to see God work because this place had 8,000 campers in 2013. And this year we'll have 38,000 campers. And so we got to see God continue to grow the ministry and work. And then COVID, you guys remember that? And so this is one of the states that you heard about on the news where we had 0 campers in 2020. And I had to let 80 staff go. And so we had to have 0 campers, and then, which meant 0 revenue. And then 2021, we're only allowed to operate at 40% occupancy. And we paid back $2.5 million in deposits for people who were going to come. And so the challenges were great. But again, this is a story of God's provision. And that here we're going to serve more campers than we ever have this year. And we've rebuilt the staff. And God used that season to rekindle Laura and I's passion for the ministry, because we've been in over 20 years. This is our 26th summer. And so that old ballad, you don't know what you got till it's gone, and so in those years of just kind of holding it together, there are only 13 people out here just kind of keeping things going. And we were able to see God continue to work. And even in all of those challenges, we would meet people that we wouldn't have met without the challenges. And so here we are, and we're sitting here today with 260 summer staff from 11 countries out there, and campers were going to come from 15 plus states all over the country. And as we have that mission statement to inspire Christ-like change through outdoor adventure, authentic relationship, and biblical truth, there's one more piece of it, and it's to change the world. That we really believe that we can make a difference, and that I said this up there yesterday, or a couple days ago. It's all one big day. That if only 10% of them leave here truly inspired to be more like their Savior, that'll make a difference. It'll make a big difference in the communities they came from. And that I believe, especially now, that more than ever there is a revival among youth, and that for a quarter of a century have done this, and that there's been some stoic generations that are like, I don't need that. I've got success. I've got the internet. I've got whatever it is. But these kids have seen all of that fail them, and that they're looking for real hope. And so, and that's why we've started family camp over the years. These youth do make decisions to want to follow Christ, but sometimes they go home to broken homes, to homes that aren't following the Lord. And so when we got this property and it had the resources, the buildings and property to serve families, that's when we started family camp, so that we can have dads and moms lead the family in a new way. And so when you attend family camp here, you learn good habits. You learn habits like how to take your family through a Bible study. So then when those kids go home, they're going home to a stronger family that has daily Bible studies and is in the Word together. And then local outreach. When we got here, there was, as we talked to people around, there was a reputation that this was the place for the rich white Texans up on the hill. And that broke our heart, because these kids from these local communities that are some of the poorest that are out there. And so we've raised scholarships over the years and had hundreds and hundreds of the kids come for free and hear the gospel for the first time, many of them. Some of them that never walked through the door of a church have begun a relationship with Jesus. And so that's day camp that happens 5 days a week. And those are almost all scholarship local kids. And we it's kind of our tithe back to the community. We kind of underwrite that program largely. And then more recently, we're starting outdoor education programs here in conjunction with the state. And I had the chance to meet with the governor, and we don't agree on all things, but we agree that we want to take care of kids and we want clean water and some things like that. And so we talked about the things we do agree on. And in that, she said, I want every kid in New Mexico to come out to that camp. And she knows who we are and what we stand for. And so we're doing outdoor education, and we have some grants to get kids to come experience, for us, God's creation, for them, nature, and that there's a lot of truth all truth is God's truth. And so we can talk about character and morals. And we know the Bible verses that back that up. And so when our Christian schools come, we have those right on top of those same exact lessons. But then, so how do we become salt and light in this state that is known for being a darker place that needs the Lord? A lot of spiritualism here. People are very, very interested in what you believe, which is cool. I've been able to share the gospel on the chairlift, on going skiing, because, you work at that Christian camp. Oh, tell me about being a Christian, and those are things in Texas like, oh, I'm a Christian too. Okay, great. And so we've been able to see God work in lots of avenues. And then I could tell you all day stuff about camp, but last thing is that the international staff. You've probably noticed we have a lot of international staff. And that if you told me 5 years ago that, hey, you're going to have 150 international staff from all these 11 countries, I'd say, no, I don't think so, because we would recruit over 200 domestic kids just pre-COVID. Whatever changed culturally where it did, I can't explain it, but kids don't necessarily want to work, and they definitely don't want to work in the dish room. And so we had always had 5 or 10 international kids, but we noticed they work hard, they show up early, they stay late, and it's an honor for them to get to be part of what's going on here. And so we began growing that. And now we have a program where they can start off in the dish room and in housekeeping. But then some of the kids that you've met that have been interns here, they're in their 4th year, and they were kitchen to leadership staff, and all in the behind the scenes support staff roles. And that's been very life-giving. That 140 of them are from Puebla, Mexico, and we have partner churches now down in Puebla that are now sending their kids, their college kids, to us to be missionaries to their kids that are going to go back to them, and then they invite them to church. And so some really rich things that are starting to happen through that. And so when we think about the Great Commission and that Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, ends of the earth, that we have these local kids that are here. We have the kids that are coming from Plano, Texas, and Colorado Springs, and then we have these kids that are coming from South Africa and New Zealand, and all over China. There's some girls from China, Poland, Mexico, and that we're able to share the gospel and be in all kinds of places. And so it's been a very rich experience to be part of this for 25 years and see God provide. And that we pray for safety and salvation, because that at the end of the day, those are the things we care the most about. We hope they have a fun time. That's great. And people say, oh, I'm going to pray these kids have fun. That's great. But at the end of the day, I want them to be safe, and I want them to know Jesus Christ. And so that is a longer version of a 25-year story of God working out here. And so thank you guys for being part of that story and serving here at Glorieta. So.
Well, after hearing Anthony's story, I couldn't help think about Paul's benediction in Ephesians, where he says, "And now unto him who is able to do far more, exceedingly abundantly more than you can ask or think, according to the power that is in us." And I think Anthony got to experience that. Hey, we hope this story inspired you. And if you want to learn more about Glorieta Adventure Camp, go to glorieta.org. The link will be in the description below. If you want to know more about RVing with purpose, go to sowersministry.org. That's the organization that we served with this month.
And if you like this video, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Beck's Backroads.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.